Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition, a special edition of the webinar series at Ball State Center for Professional Selling. My name is Deva Rangarajan, and I'm the host of the show. And again, in the spirit of what is happening in the business environment today with the coronavirus, I have another speaker sharing with me some of his insights about what are the repercussions for the sales function because of this COVID and this prolonged period of what we would say is inactivity in typical selling situations. So it's my pleasure to have Professor Dr. Rakesh Singh from IMT Ghaziabad, which is one of the premier institutions of management education in India. So Professor Rakesh Singh, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you very much, Deva. Thank you
Yeah.
for having me here on your webinar.
Yeah, indeed. So essentially, Rakesh, I'll tell you why I'm reaching out to you because while we're connected on LinkedIn, I saw one of your posts, which is actually one of your thoughts. It's just not a sharing of a post; it's actually some of your own thoughts about this feeling of anxiety among salespeople because of what is happening right now. So, could you shed some light into this idea of anxiety and why you came up with this
Yeah.
piece?
So mostly, whenever we think about salespeople, salespeople are the ones who are always there in a goal pursuit situation. So they have a goal, they have a target, they
Yeah,
have a budget that they need to follow, and anxiety in their life is like a very strong emotion, and potentially, this could interrupt
yeah,
their thinking process, their action, and all of that. So to my mind, today when salespeople are, kind of with the lockdown and everything after
yeah,
this COVID thing, I thought that they could be going through some very unprecedented levels of anxiety, and
yeah,
primarily because of a couple of reasons. If you look at the source of anxiety that salespeople normally, even in normal circumstances, they would have, would be first from the selling process part itself.
yeah,
Where do I, how do I prospect for customer? How do I approach and do the call, right? How do I do the negotiation?
yeah,
How do I take it to the closure and all that? Now, all of that. Now, think about it that just before this disruption or this disturbance came into our lives and their lives as well, there would be many calls at different stages
yeah,
in its process, right?
yeah,
So think from a salesperson perspective that he was about to close something, and then that company is now no
yeah,
longer
yeah,
producing.
yeah,
So that raw material or the machinery tool or a small a maintenance item that he was trying to negotiate, it's kind of stuck.
yeah,
And he or she, I mean, the salesperson doesn't really know how things are
yeah,
going to move. The second one is he has to produce, so his orders have to come, so he
yeah,
needs to also uh, uh, try and do selling online.
yeah,
Now, most of the salespeople, or I would say many salespeople, are not used to it.
yeah,
So that is a huge process change for the salesperson, that how do you actually engage with
yeah,
clients using online
yeah.
tools, and so that is another, because
Mm.
especially I can say this with confidence, in Indian context, relationship oriented people,
Yeah,
they like to meet face to face, they want
yeah,
to talk so many other things, just not about the business. So that is another
yeah,
source of it. The second one is about the outcome part of it.
yeah,
So what is going to happen to my targets? How am I going to justify my position that
yeah,
I could not achieve my
yeah.
numbers, and this has been the situation. What about the feedback that is going to come from my supervisor? How
Yes.
is he going to
Yeah,
look at me?
yeah,
That could I adapt to this change? Did I make myself effective
yeah,
in the change scenario? Am I being useful to my supervisor? Well, so how am I going to handle that feedback? And sometimes it could also be that I have got a customer signed up the order, and then the order fulfillment has to happen,
yes.
and my logistics people are stuck,
Yeah,
and maybe the customer needs it now, and I'm not
yeah,
able to serve the customer. So what kind of feedback I'm going to get from the customers? So
yeah,
that could be another source. These are the outcome part of it.
Yeah.
The third one, which is I think is even more difficult, is my as a salesperson, my own interaction within my own network.
Yes.
So what other salespeople are talking about, because they are sharing their anxiety, apprehension, with me. So that is adding on to my anxiety as well. So
Yeah.
that dominant narrative which is
Yeah.
floating around is
Yeah.
also having an impact on me. And not to kind of miss the social aspect of it, the family,
Yeah.
because I have a family, and this virus thing is moving around, and I'm worried about my family, relatives,
Yeah.
so many other things. So that also is kind of occupying and sort of adding some more fuel to my anxiety.
Absolutely.
And all of that makes my thing, for salespeople. And when I'm speaking in first person account and salesperson, I should tell you, Deva, that I did sales for almost 24 years. So I'm a salesperson by heart.
Yeah.
So that's the reason this thing comes up. So and think about then the organizational processes.
Yeah.
So typically in India, this lockdown thing came at a real bad time for salespeople at least. March is the month where you close the year.
Yeah.
The budget year is closed.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
March decides how
Yeah.
much of annual budget you did, how
Yeah.
much of bonus you will
Yeah.
earn, your annual bonuses, and all of that. So that is kind of
Wow.
is under a question mark. The second is you need to plan from April 2020
To,
to March 2021. So
wow.
now here, salespeople are supposed to be negotiating their targets for next year. Now think about a situation where they are not very obviously happy about whatever the year they have closed, because they could practically not sell for almost
Yeah.
1 month. Yeah, and then looking at target setting in an uncertain scenario, you do not really know how your customers business are going to be, especially in a B2B context, because
Yeah.
whole thing will depend on how your customers business are going to be. That is what
Indeed.
will determine what kind of volume you are going to generate. So I guess all of this is a big source of anxiety, and many people I know, because many of my colleagues or many of people who still keep in touch, and they
Uh,
sometimes take advice from me as well,
yeah.
they voice these concerns, and they say, it's really just too much of uncertainty. That's
Sure.
what I would say. Yeah.
And I think this is amazing you talk about this, because for me, kind of what you said, having read your article, sort of gave me an idea that you're going to have stress because of the sales process, the outcomes, and the family. But what was very interesting is actually your other source of normal comfort. The other salespeople might actually be adding to your anxiety, which is very,
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
interesting. So if essentially people always talk about, for the most part, about the positive aspects of networks, but
Mhm.
there could be a negative side during these really turbulent times,
Correct.
that it actually could make you question your own ability to actually deal with it. So
Yeah.
before I get into the your picking your brains on how should salespeople try to deal with this level of anxiety themselves, right? Let me ask
Mhm.
you a couple of things which has got to do with what can a manager and an organization do. Because here I would like to point out to another sharing that you did on LinkedIn recently about Siemens making a statement that they will not be
Absolutely.
laying off people. So to what extent do you actually think that you talked about target setting and stuff like that? So essentially supervisors typically represent the organization and the goals and objectives of the organization that they're all working in, right? So to what extent do you think that these higher levels of sales management play a critical role in helping manage this anxiety by salespeople?
Okay. That's a very nice question you asked, and I would answer that saying first what they shouldn't be doing,
Ah,
the managers.
yeah,
So, and I'll give you an example. I talked about target setting, right? So, target setting in most of the organization, let's say we are talking about a regional manager and an all India manager, a country manager, they are
yeah,
negotiating targets. Now, it is expected that when you are setting target, you will build in stretch, but at the same time, you will
yeah,
also build in reason and logic.
absolutely.
So that everybody is on the same page and all of that. Now, think from the perspective of a manager, let's say he is in charge of the Eastern India,
Mm.
based out of Calcutta, and his boss is negotiating target, and he's saying, no, no, see, we have to look at the loss that we made last year, and we look at the growth that we are projecting, and we should look at 25% or 30%
Yeah.
growth and all of that. And this manager is clueless because he thinks that at this point of time, committing to such a huge growth would be like, and this guy, he actually spoke to me, and that's why I thought I'll bring this example. He's saying that if I agree to this target, I will be actually lying to my organization.
Yeah.
He says, by doing so, I'll be doing something which is not
Yeah.
ethical. I'm actually creating a false promise. But his boss wants,
Mm.
no, no, you have to agree to this, and we have to create a plan around this and all that. I understand in a usual scenario, you
Yeah.
want to push your team and all of
Yeah.
that. So maybe one thing that I think managers can possibly realize and say that, this is extraordinary time.
Yeah.
Let's show. So that famous thing about salespeople, ego, drive, and
Yeah.
empathy. This is the time where you want to do a little bit of trade off from your ego drive with empathy. You
Empty.
want
Yeah.
to you want to give little more of empathy. Maybe ego drive can take a backseat for the time being at this point of time, and try and give confidence to your team, because the reason is, see, anxiety is related to a very strong sense of insecurity.
Mm.
And one of the way that insecurity develops is when individuals start thinking about that they are threatened. There is a lot of uncertainty, and when they see that the organization doesn't have a clue that how they are going to act in this
Yeah.
situation,
Yeah.
right? Because
Indeed.
this is the time they look up to the organization, they
Yeah.
look up to their bosses,
Yeah.
that, oh, so my boss is going to tell me that, okay, this is how we are going to navigate through this.
Is.
So anything that managers do which can sort of be a threatening to the employee or the manager, I mean their subordinate manager, I think that would increase the sense of insecurity. And that is something I think, in fact, in another post, I actually urged sales managers that at this point of time, please, even if you have a plan to, cut jobs and all that, don't talk about it now. This is
Indeed.
not the time. This
True.
is the time you have to be standing behind your sales
Team.
team and saying that, go ahead, do the best that you want to do.
Indeed.
And
Indeed.
I think that's something very important for sales organizations to realize.
But actually, I think you talk about this. I can easily imagine two other things that could be negative things because of this. Because if you don't do a good job of communicating, I think you could also encourage unethical behavior by salespeople.
Absolutely.
Not with in terms of saying agreeing to the targets, but actually doing anything to get the business. And
Absolutely.
that could be one way. And it could also have a negative repercussion, because by saying yes, you're now giving ammunition to your country manager to put pressure on other parts, saying, so if you're doing it in the if Eastern Indian, for example, in your context, if you take a look at
Yeah.
the country manager, say, hey, look, the person who's responsible, the Eastern divisional manager, says he or she can do it. So why are you in the South or in the West making a big deal of these targets? So essentially, you're going to create some kind of a rivalry within your organization. That's not what you want, because at the end of the day, you do not want different kind of things happening. One set of promises being made in one part of your organizational boundaries and territories, another set of promises being made, and then your customers start talking to each other, and suddenly they realize what is happening out here. So on top
Absolutely.
of all the things that you said, I think it's going to have a kind of a domino effect on other things, uh,
Exactly.
which is something that I think it's very, very important for us to not lose track of as well.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And you know what? Sales teams. I mean, we really
Yeah.
can't undermine that importance. That they really need to be emotionally strong,
Hmm.
right? So and why do I say that? I say this because this crisis will get over,
Yeah.
at some point,
Yeah.
and then you would want your sales team to do everything possible to
Exactly.
get business back on track.
Absolutely.
So if you do not take care of their emotional strength at these times, who are the people who are going to bring you back on track?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
this is the time you really want to invest in your sales team, not
Absolutely.
only in terms of not in terms of infrastructure or giving them bonuses or anything, but the emotional support that they need. How do you reduce
Absolutely.
their anxiety levels? How do you feel them secure? How do you feel them, make them feel that companies, they really care for them? So these are the kind of things, I guess, it works magic. Like, think about it, Siemens, the CEO, making that announcement. Think
Absolutely.
about the impact it would have had on all the employees of Siemens. It
Absolutely.
really gives them so much,
Area, right? There's example of Siemens, but there's also example of Salesforce saying that at least for 3 months or something that they're not going
absolutely.
to. The idea is that I'm sure that for every multi-big organization that makes this statement, there are also wonderful organizations also doing it at different levels that don't get the same kind of publicity.
And
Yeah.
and one more thing, Deva, I wanted to say on this is that, like in India, there are certain so most of the sales force in India, they would be working from
Yeah.
home
Yeah.
mostly. However, there are some essential services like newspapers,
Yeah.
because I kind of worked in that industry for long. Now, in India, newspaper sales team are still working out in the field. Okay. Now think about it. So they are like the way policemen are working on the road,
Yeah.
or the doctors are working on hospital, nurses are working, or healthcare staff working there. These people, this sales team is every day morning, they are going to the distribution dumps, or distribution center as they call it, where all the newspaper retailers come, pick up their supplies and go and
Yeah.
all of. They are doing a very, very difficult job, and difficult job not in terms of what exactly they are doing, but in the environment, because in the distribution dump it is difficult to maintain social distancing.
Yeah.
So they are, in that sense, they are at risk. So
Yeah.
they use mask and all that,
Yeah.
the precautions, all of that they take. And I feel that companies are not doing enough for them. Why? I thought that in for these people, this is the time where no less than CEO should be writing about them
Absolutely.
on their Twitter handle. you know
Indeed.
they should be writing about them. I remember a couple of months ago in Mumbai, there was a heavy rains, and for 2-3 days everything was like stopped and all that, but the newspapers used to get delivered. So Anand Mahindra, he tweeted about a
Absolutely.
newspaper, and he said that I'm really amazed with the. Now, I thought that maybe Anand Mahindra tweeting is nice, but the company CEO tweeting about it would have been even nicer. You know,
Absolutely.
and therefore, this also is the time for the top brass of the company to throw some weight behind the sales force, saying, you guys are doing really something great, and kind of stay there, and we are going to do even bigger things. I
Indeed.
guess that would keep the sales team intact, and they would do even bigger things.
Wonderful. So, no, but actually, in the interest of time, my last set of
Yeah.
question, actually, and it's again something,
Mm,
please take your
mm.
time to answer this as well, is what can salespeople themselves do? Because essentially, expecting sales
Absolutely.
organizations and managers do it, I think if they do it, fantastic. But what are the things within the control of a salesperson that he or she can do to try and make sure that they don't fall prey to anxiety, or worse, give in to anxiety and engage in behaviors that could be detrimental to everybody?
Here is what I think they should be doing, and this is what I have advised to many
Yeah.
salespeople. Some of my ex-students who are
Yeah.
into sales organizations. So I say that, look, this is a great opportunity because you have been doing face-to-face selling for long. Now, this is a new way of selling that you could explore. So think about using LinkedIn sales, generating leads, and which you were not doing earlier. But this is the time you should try out new lead generation mechanism.
Yeah.
Try out how do you set up appointment with customers, and also think that your customers are working from home.
Yeah.
Possibly it will be easier for you to secure an appointment.
Yeah.
So much of flexibility is available. So maybe you could create some nice sales presentations which you can
Yeah.
share with your client over that. So I guess new skills,
Yeah.
for salespeople to acquire at this point of time is a great development thing. The second one is that, see, for salespeople, anxiety and insecurity is not something which is a new animal that they have seen.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
they have a coping mechanism and they do
Yeah.
that. I think the one uh, tool, I think, which is very, very useful for salespeople at this point of time, that how do they manage themselves,
Yeah.
manage their time very well,
Yeah.
manage their priorities very well. Don't let that time slip from them, that, oh, I couldn't make any use of that time.
Yeah.
So really kind of being very planned in terms of the activities that they want to do.
Yeah.
What is it that do they need any help from their
Yeah.
supervisors? Shouldn't be afraid to ask for that.
Yeah.
So I guess this is one good time to also learn how to better organize yourself in
Indeed.
your day-to-day selling activity.
Absolutely. And what are your thoughts about maybe engaging with some of your counterparts who are not in sales within your organization? Because now would be the time when you're not sometimes as pressed to go and travel for long distances to go visit your customer. That this is a
Yeah,
great opportunity for you to empathize, not just with the customer, because that we can understand. But I think in my opinion, isn't this also the great time that when you start empathizing with going back into and talking to your colleagues who have been, but I mean colleagues not in sales, but who have been helping you get those orders, make those deliveries, make those maintenance repairs kind of stuff when needed by the customer.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
this is something that is going to come, and as an organization, the more you can actually facilitate this, you as an organization are going to come back stronger. I mean,
right.
yes, that as a team, you're going to come back stronger. So do you think that this is also something that you see happening in the context of one of the better salespeople about how they react internally as well?
In fact, great that you said this, because we have a paper in JPSSM. It is titled "Connect Within to Connect Outside,"
Yeah.
and it basically meant about how do you build internal relationships. And couldn't be a better time, and better uses of this time to check back with your people in service, in manufacturing,
Yeah.
and try and find out, and maybe, as we say, that they have their own anxiety and insecurity. You could actually help them. You could
Yeah.
actually tell them that, you know what, don't worry, the orders are going to come back to our regular level. In so don't think that you are going to stuck with so much of inventory or anything like that. So it's a kind of reassurance across functions. Yeah, certainly.
Fantastic. I love this because essentially this dovetails very well with what Professor Sridhar Guda, who was my previous guest, talked about,
Yeah,
because he talked about the concept of spirituality, and the spirituality, according to him, was how eventually you can come to empathize. That is, you come up with what he talked about, from the noisy ego to the quiet ego, and then you start thinking about others. You start empathizing with others, and
absolutely.
when you do that, it also kind of gives you a perspective, and working with others also make sure that you're not alone in the process. You then tap into others, and that's something that I think is very, very interesting from the viewpoint of how this dovetails well into the concept of empathy. You talked about it as empathy. That's your area of expertise. We go into that. Sridhar was talking from the viewpoint of empathy as a kind of what is spirituality coming into the workplace.
Right.
I think it's very, very interesting from the perspective. So, but that's all the time that we have today. Rakesh, thank you so much for sharing some
Thank you,
very,
Deva.
very
Thanks.
interesting insights. And
Thank
and
you.
folks, again, these are tough times, but again, what can we do as sales educators is to actually share what we can find from experts from around the world. But what it means for you as a salesperson is that try to take a look at what some of the things that they say, see if it applies to your case. And for sales managers, again, you play such a vital role in making sure that you do not uh, necessarily let already the pressure that is leading to anxiety amongst your salespeople uh, kind of burn them out or make them do things that is going to hurt you when things are going to start picking up again. So thank you again, and stay tuned for the
Okay.
next. Thank you again, Rakesh.
Thanks.